Hello, everybody. This is Tom Sega from Duluth Pack, and this is the Leader of the Pack podcast. And today we have a very special guest and talk about leader. We call this the Leader of the Pack. This is the leader of all leaders. Today, our guest is Colonel Greg Gadson, retired U.S. Army. We are going to have some fun today, and we are going to talk to a true leader. Colonel, welcome.
Well, thank you, Tom. What an honor to be here with you today, and I appreciate the invitation to be on your podcast, Leader of the Pack. What a perfect play on words and how appropriate.
Well, I got to tell you, folks, Colonel Gadson and myself have not known each other for very long. We met this July at a fundraiser, and I can tell you that I was honored to be put at a table with Colonel Gadson. Did not know him prior to, did not know all this history that we are going to learn about today until I learned a little bit that night, and we got chatting and really hit it off, and then learned Colonel Gadson's history. And I can tell you, I have goosebumps. I am in awe that he would spend time with us today, and we're going to learn a whole bunch. So let's dive in and learn about Colonel Gadson. Colonel Gadson, tell us about you. Let's go back to the beginning.
All right.
Where did you grow up and go to high school and all those good things?
Right. So I'll start with saying that I typically, or I like to call Chesapeake, Virginia home, the Tidewater area. Four cities of Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Chesapeake, we collectively call the area Tidewater. It's where I spent, I say my formative years growing up. I was actually born in I guess the Southwest or Midwest in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I didn't spend much time there. My mom had gone there to be with her sister, and so as you know, a lot of times back in those times, you spend the birth with a family member. So I was born in Oklahoma City, but didn't stay there very long at all. My parents were actually living in Washington, D.C., where they were college students at Howard University. So Washington, D.C., ironically, was kind of my first home, which I'm kind of outside as a retiree. My parents graduated from Howard University in '70, and my mother was an educator, and my father was a pharmacist. He worked for Eli Lilly Company for his right out of college, and so we moved around a little bit. Spent time in Rochester, New York, as well as Buffalo. But when he decided to get out of sales and practice pharmacy in the hospital, we moved to the Tidewater area, first in Norfolk and then finally in Chesapeake. So that's why I call that home. I would, first, my parents were very good students, and I was sort of the antithesis of that. I was a jock, and I wanted to do it my way, and so focused a lot of my energy into becoming an athlete, although they wouldn't allow me to divorce my school books completely. So I was a decent student. I was an okay student, but certainly never achieved my maximum potential. Wanted to grow up and be a professional football player. Thought I was offered and a full scholarship to University of Virginia, and thought I was heading that way, and kind of at the last minute they decided to not to offer me a scholarship. I was devastated, heartbroken, and didn't know where I was going to go. That was plan B was going to be having parents, having a blessed family. A college recruiter from the United States Military Academy at West Point came to my high school to recruit another student athlete. And my coach just happened to say, hey, here's a guy that doesn't have anywhere to go. That was me. And I took my fifth official visit to West Point, The only question I asked was whether they played Division I football, because I now had this kind of burning fire to show everyone that I could play football at the highest level. The only question I remember asking was, do they play Division I football? And they said yes. And so I'm like, kind of sign me up. So,
sign me up.
so I knew that this track was going to take me off of being a professional football player. I knew that from the very beginning. But I knew I was going to get a good education, and I was going to play division. I was going to play football at the highest level and be comfortable with that.
So you played all 4 years at West Point.
Yes, sir.
As a linebacker?
Outside linebacker. Yep. 195-pound outside linebacker.
I'll tell you what, though, I've done some deep diving here, Colonel. I saw in 195 pounds, you look like you could throw that 195 pounds around pretty well out there. You go to West Point, you play 4 years of football, and then it's time to do your commission.
Yep. So I graduated, and along the way, I've made lifelong friends. But my number one lifelong friend is my partner, my wife, and classmate. We met. We started dating my junior year, and we got married 3 days after we graduated. I was commissioned a field artillery officer, and we would eventually, after completing our she was a signal officer. After completing our basic courses, our officer basic courses, be stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Ironically, the place where I was, not far from the place I was born.
I was going to say, kind of going back home.
Right, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about basic training, because you obviously go in as an officer.
Right.
As a graduate of West Point. Tell us a little bit for all of us out here listening that haven't been through the military, what basic training's about, and then forward from there onto some advanced training.
Well, one thing I left out, Tom, was so I was on the long course at West Point. Probably not an academic resume that prepared me to go to a place like that. I actually enlisted for a year, and I was at the United States Military Prep School at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey. So I would actually go through basic training. Basic training is, I would describe a process of professional hellraisers, an 8-week indoctrination where you start to understand that you're part of an organization that is not about you, but it's about the greater purpose and the greater mission. And so you've got to learn to put you aside and put the we ahead of yourself. And they do an effective job of doing that, because if you don't get it, your life becomes significantly tougher. And so they break you down to build you back up. And so that is a life, a tried and true method from the history of our military. Of course, it's evolved as we've become smarter, and everybody can say, the generation before you can tell you that they slept with dinosaurs and ate raw meat or whatever, when dinosaurs walked the plane. But that's the evolution of just being smarter about and learning more about ourselves physically, mentally and emotionally.
Being that you were a high-level athlete, and then coming into basic training, and team sports like football is not about, well, you hope it's not about me, right? You hope it's about us and we. I'm assuming that probably helped you going into basic?
Absolutely. It was, the two-a-days of football and all those. So I think the I would say that the mental stress of sort of stripping your, having something, being part of something bigger yourself certainly wasn't so traumatic for me. Probably the long days and the marching and all that, again, is something new. There's a newness there, but I think the discipline of an athlete, you already understand, regardless of your sport, that, it takes discipline and focus, and it was the matter of the task. So not tremendously upheaval for me. In fact, I said, Tom, I was a paper boy and all the way through high school. I got up at 4:30 every morning. My brother and I got up at 4:30 every morning to deliver almost 300 papers. And so when I joined the Army, I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning. So I got
say, hey, I get to sleep in.
Right, absolutely. Yep.
I get to sleep in. So you go through basic training. So you went back and enlisted. You come through basic training, and then what's the progression after that for you after coming out of West Point? And
well, so I had to enlist to go through the prep school. That was 11 months, and then I was discharged to enter West Point. So
okay.
And then I went through West Point in the next 4 years. So then I was commissioned, and upon graduation, I was commissioned
as an officer.
Yep.
Awesome. Tell us about deployments, because we've obviously been in in a couple wars here for some time, for the greater part of your career.
Yep.
And you've had several tours overseas.
Yes, sir. So right out of the bat, or almost out of the bat, but as a second lieutenant in my first assignment, I was ultimately a platoon leader in an 8-inch artillery platoon in the 75th FA Brigade. 518 FA was my battalion. When Saddam Hussein and Iraq invaded Kuwait, that otherwise known as Desert Shield, Desert Storm, I was deployed to help push the Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. So that was my first deployment. And I'll be honest with you, it was something that I was sort of looking for, almost sort of Ernest Hemingway, like, where you want the ultimate test, and the ultimate test as an officer is war, and I have to say that I was excited and I was looking forward to proving myself in combat. And after the deployment, obviously we were successful in accomplishing our mission. What I walked away with was the very cold, stark face of war, and it's not good. There's nothing good about it. Even if it's justified, which we have no argument of the justification in this case. Taking another life, seeing the death and destruction, quite honestly, of Saddam Hussein's soldiers didn't have the ability to say, no, I don't want to do this. They were doing exactly what they were told to do, just like I was doing what I was told to do. And death and destruction, there's nothing pleasant about it. There's nothing glamorous about it, regardless of its justification. So I kind of came back with a couple things. First, I didn't know whether or not I was going to do this as a career, but I just always felt like this is for real. And whatever I have to do, my focus has to be that whoever is under me, we're prepared to do our mission and take care of ourselves. And secondly, there's just like honestly, there's nothing good about war. There isn't. Um, and that, you know, that was sort of a very sobering interpersonal kind of perspective that I took away. And then, you know, over the next 20 years, I deployed to the Balkans in a stability operation, no violent combat, but understanding again a case where a society turned upon itself and committed atrocities in the name of whatever. Is just, again, you know, again, it's just sad and sobering that we are, that mankind is willing to do this thing to themselves. And then my next deployment was as a senior major to Afghanistan, where I was a brigade XO, a brigade executive officer, you know, coming under, you know, being on a forward operating base in Eastern Afghanistan, you know, coming under attack every month and just dealing with, you know, life and death almost every day. I mean, there's nothing more sobering than, you know, putting an American soldier on a helicopter to send him home in a transfer case. It's just, it is. I always said to myself, you know, this person did not wake up the day and say this was their day. And then, you know, I said in my final deployment, operational deployment, was Iraq during the surge. The most violent,
that's your fourth deployment.
Yeah, fourth combat or operational deployment.
Okay.
In an environment where in those early months of 2007, almost every single day a U.S. serviceman or paid in full measure. I mean, if you can imagine being in a profession where you went to work every day knowing somebody that had that same uniform on wasn't coming home alive, that was sort of the environment that we were in.
Colonel, how do you dissociate from home, or can you dissociate from home when you're on a deployment like you've been on multiple times, where these awful things are happening around you? You're in that environment, yet back home here, there's family and there's loved ones. How do you dissociate, or can you dissociate that I'm here now and I have to focus 100% on what I'm doing here?
Absolutely. It is. So a couple of things on that, Tom. The first kind of thought that came to mind as you were talking about that, so I was in Afghanistan, and the Russians wouldn't let us fly over their airspace to get to Afghanistan. So I was stationed in Hawaii at the time. So we literally had to fly east. So from Hawaii to California, California to the East Coast to Ireland, Ireland to Turkey, Turkey to Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan to Afghanistan. So that trip took literally 4 days.
Wow.
And so about halfway through my 1-year tour in Afghanistan, I got to go home for 2 weeks of R&R. And so I'm in Afghanistan, which I kind of lightly call it the middle of nowhere. I don't know that you can go to any more of a remote place on this planet. I mean, maybe North Korea, but it's just the land where time stood still. And 4 days later, I'm driving down a highway in Hawaii, you know, paradise. And I was literally just overcome with the literal change in scenery that happened in those 4 days. I mean, it's like, am I dreaming? You know, am I home, or was I in a nightmare? And, you know, just, it is really it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around. But the second part of your question is, you know, I say when we deploy, when our country sends us somewhere, Mom and dad and apple pie, that American flag, we proudly go. But when we're there, all that's gone. It's about ourselves. It's about those people that I'm there with, that I'm serving with. Home is, you really have to focus on your mission and your task, and being vigilant and focused.
That has to be so incredibly difficult to turn a switch on and turn a switch off, which is, it sounds like there's no choice, but we have to do that. And when you're with your brothers and you're overseas, that has to be our focus. And this is what we have to do every day.
Yep. It is.
So if you don't mind, and folks, this, just listen really close, because Colonel Gadson has a story here to tell, and you're on your 4th deployment, and May 7th, the evening of May 7th comes. Folks, listen close. This is incredible.
So the irony of the night I was wounded was that I had just departed from a memorial service for 2 young men in a sister battalion that had been killed at a sister battalion from Fort Riley, Kansas. We were part of the same brigade. First Lieutenant Ryan Jones and Specialist Sunson were killed 3 days earlier by an improvised explosive device. And I had known of people that were hurt and wounded in those early months of Iraq, and somehow you're able to kind of, I don't want to say disassociate it, but it really is sort of the environment. But in this case, on this evening for me, maybe the fact that they were from the same brigade I was with, they came from Fort Riley, Kansas, as I were, the sacrifice of these 2 young men had really kind of hung on to me. I was just quite honestly wondering if we were making a difference. Was this worth it? What were their families going through as they were still obviously processing the death of loved ones, and just all those myriad of thoughts are just literally rolling through my head, even after I departed the memorial service back to my headquarters in a 4-vehicle patrol. I was vehicle number 3 or 4. We were traveling in a kind of a herringbone formation, and what we would consider a major road or highway in the United States, probably going about 40 miles an hour. And wham, my vehicle's hit by an improvised command wire detonated. So someone saw us coming. There was probably a spotter, and then there was somebody that was on the trigger. So it wasn't, I didn't run over a random bomb. I was targeted, and someone detonated the explosive when my vehicle was close enough. And so the blasts lifted. I was in an armored Humvee, M1151 up armored Humvee, 15,000-pound vehicle. The blast lifted my vehicle off the road and ejected me out of the vehicle, where I remember kind of flying through the air and kind of hitting the ground and coming to a rolling stop on my back. I knew what had happened. There was no doubt that it was an IED. There was sort of this disbelief a little bit, like, I can't believe this has happened to me. And then all of a sudden you go from that to, this is serious. And as you heard me say, Tom, I said the last thing that I consciously remember saying was, God, I don't want to die here. And I was out. My senior non-commissioned officer, my patrol, First Sergeant Frederick Johnson, would be the first to arrive at my vehicle. And he was the one to identify that I was missing. And he would be the first to find me about a football field from where my vehicle stopped, is where they found me. Already, I'm already unconscious, lying in a pool of my blood. He began to resuscitate me while a young 19-year-old private medic would get the tourniquets on my legs. The fact that the doctors say saved my life. Just to give you and so they eventually got me in a vehicle and moved me back to an aid station where a medevac helicopter could come get me and take me to a cache where I would have my initial surgery. Just to kind of give you a perspective of my injuries, in those first 4 to 6 hours or so after I was wounded, I went through 129 pints of blood. I died 6 times. But even more profoundly, what I would tell you about our environment is that in the month of May of 2007 alone, 131 U.S. service members were paid with their lives, and more than 10 times that were severely wounded. So it was a very brutal environment. That was our place of work. That was our place of duty.
Colonel, you get injured, you get medevaced out. Where did you get medevaced to? And then what was the process then? Because I know you ended up recovering and rehabbing in Walter Reed.
Right.
How does all that work for those of us that just hear this on the news and we never have the chance to have a discussion with somebody who's been through this? They live it firsthand. They still live it every day today.
Right. So we were, it was called FOB Falcon. It was actually my parent brigade. I had been attached to a different brigade. So 4th Brigade of the 1st Infantry was on Forward Operating Base Falcon. So I was initially triaged on the base I had just left from the memorial service. A medevac would come in and get me and take me to a combat hospital in the middle of Baghdad, actually in the green zone, if you're familiar with that term. And that's where I had my initial surgery. The next day, they would move me from there to Balad, which was an Air Force base, and that's where they would evacuate me out of theater. On a C-17, they flew me from Balad, Iraq, to Longstuhl, Germany, where I was operated on again. And then the following day, I was flown to Andrews Air Force Base, where I'd be ground transported to Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington, D.C., where I arrived on the 11th of May. So for me, literally 4 days from being wounded, I was back in the States at a major trauma center.
So at any of this time, had you regained consciousness?
No. When I arrived at Walter Reed on the 11th of May, I was intubated on a feeding tube in an induced coma. So I will tell you, my last memory of being in Iraq was talking to my brigade commander. So I was a lieutenant colonel by this time when I was wounded. My brigade commander was a full colonel, and I was just telling him to, please tell Kim and my kids that I love them, because I didn't know whether I was going to make it. I mean, I knew it was bad. Not that I had a mirror to look at, but I had enough people around me that I knew, and the look in their eyes told me everything. And so I remember hearing the helicopter coming in to pick me up, and then that's it. I remember nothing else until eventually waking up in Walter Reed.
I have goosebumps just listening. And the first time I heard you talk at the event here in July, I had absolute goosebumps. And I know that was pure impromptu for you, because you said that when they gave you the microphone. But I know you do a lot of speaking engagements, and just hearing you talk about it, what you all did for a living, what you all did for us and continue to, and the troops do. We who go to work every day and think that we have stressful days and we have tough days and all of that. Not once have I ever gone to work and thought ever that I'd have to tell somebody to tell my loved ones that I love them. And we all need to think about that a little more and really put some thought into what we do, we get to do because of what all of our military does for us. And I both times I've heard you speak, I'm in awe because it makes me think how easy our jobs are, how our stresses, we make them probably a lot bigger, Colonel, than they actually are, because we've never been put to the test that our troops are. And I know there's a lot of PTSD issues out there. And I know we met at a fundraiser where funds are going to help troops come back from these awful things that they see and go through so that they can get back into real life like the rest of us have it so easy because we never leave what this life is. So, I mean, I have to thank you, and I don't want to belabor all of your injuries and what you went through there. But I want to talk a little bit about some wonderful things as well, and some things that you said. One is, and we'll talk about this because we're going to talk about you being an NFL star as well. The power of belief and how you got that through to some Super Bowl champions. But if I've done some additional research on you, Colonel, and I see you when you have on your dress blues, and that jacket's getting a little heavy there because there are a lot of medals and a lot of ribbons that come down the front of your uniform. Can you tell us about some of those? Because as a layman, I don't understand what a lot of those are about, or the sacrifice that people have to do, or the work they have to put in to get some of those.
Sometimes you can probably appreciate that, and your employees, especially as the leading your company, is that personal thanks from you can go a lot more than a bonus or something that is more than money. I think a personal thanks, and so our award system is sort of commiserate to a couple of things, doing something above and beyond, and is commiserate to your rank. And so, the ones that are at the bottom, eventually, like for me, that's those are kind of the deployments. They just mark that I've been deployed, and the ribbon, the campaign ribbon of where I've been. It's sort of a little bit of a history of where you've been. And then there's meritorious and achievement medals that you get, again, achievement medals, and maybe as a junior enlisted soldier or a junior officer. But as you get higher up, the bar for, above and beyond, it gets more significant. And so, for me, my higher awards, my highest award was my last one, the one as I was going out the door, my Distinguished Service Medal. And maybe that's sort of, it's our second highest medal, but it's not a Valorous Medal. The Bronze Star, the Silver Star, the Distinguished Service Cross, and the Medal of Honor are Valorous Awards. Or you could get I have a Bronze Star, but I don't have it with a V device. A V says that there is something that you did that was valorous related to what you were doing. And so again, it tells a little bit of a story, tells a little bit about maybe where you've been and what you've done. and it's our way because we can't give people bonuses in their pay, but we can still recognize and acknowledge their contributions above and beyond the call. And so that's sort of what our award system is kind of built around.
Okay. And you also have the Legion of Merit Medal, the
Yep.
Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Purple Heart, and so many more when I see that, and we appreciate it. So tell us about the title of Director of Wounded Warrior, the Wounded Warrior Program.
Right. So that was a journey. So as you know, I was wounded in 2007, and I began to recover. While I was recovering, I went to grad school at Georgetown University and earned a master's degree in policy management.
And that's the guy who didn't like school that much.
Yeah, but I needed something to do. I was beyond video games. I can't figure those things out, and so I figured I really wanted something where my thought was, if I went to school, if I failed, no one was counting on me. It would only impact me. I wanted some responsibility, but I didn't want somebody necessarily counting on me. And so school seemed like a good choice. So I went to school for a year and got a master's at Georgetown. And then I did a war college fellowship. Now, obviously, given my wounds, I had to go through a medical board. I knew that I was going to be found not fit to serve, but there was a program called Continuation on Active Duty that I could apply to stay on active duty after being found unfit, basically making an argument that I could still make a valuable contribution to the Army. And so after I was found unfit and I started that process, the Army approved for me to stay on active duty in January of 2010. So just short of 3 years from when I was wounded, they said I could continue to serve. And, and trying to figure out what I would do, eventually I would assume duties as the director of the Army Wounded Warrior Program. It was called, its acronym was AW2. And it was a program that the Army developed to help our severely wounded, injured, and ill service members transition, whether they're from injury or illness, to transition back into the force, like me, for example, or to transition to civilian life. We understood, given these wars now, and really kind of, I'd say, the inconsistencies of the VA, and really on a larger scale, the fact that America didn't expect us to be bogged down in these long wars, and so our society was not even prepared for this transition. And so the Army built this program, and I got to run it for a couple of years to ensure that that we weren't just kicking people out of the Army and saying thanks, but thanks for your service, have a nice day, but that we were kind of parachuting them down and give them a chance to really have an effective transition and set themselves up for success.
Well, couldn't ask for a better person, somebody who's seen every single side of that.
Yes, sir.
To come and run an agency such as that, so that people can get the help that they need, because you know what, we as Americans need to get behind this and forget about our political affiliations and all those kind of things. I don't care about that. We get to do what we get to do because of what our military does, whether you like it or not. And at the end of the day, we need to take care of these people, not only short term, but long term, because of all they do for us. And we get the easy way out. I get to drive down the hill and come to work and deal with awesome employees and make some products and sell them. I can't do that without this. And so I know that, I pontificate that quite often to people, and people around the office here have to hear it. And I'm at the point of my life, I don't care. Let's get on a light note for a minute, because you have some pretty fun things that have happened in retirement.
Yeah.
So you have two, not just one, because anyone can have one. You have two Super Bowl rings. Can you tell us how you got those?
Yes, sir. Yes. So, it's part of I call it part of my family, part of my personal parachute. Ironically, not ironically, but one of my classmates and former teammates from West Point, who was a coach for the New York Giants, actually had come to visit me in the hospital and back in July, just a couple of months after I was wounded, still recovering. After his visit, when the Giants come to town to play the Washington Redskins, would you like to come to the game? And I said, sure. So, as the 2007-2008 season started, the Giants would start out 0-2. They lost the first two games miserably, and they were coming to Washington to play the undefeated Redskins that were 2-0. And he called me on that Monday before the game and wanted to confirm whether or not I wanted to come to the game, and I did, and I asked for 4 tickets for cover my family. And then the next day he called me back on Tuesday and said, hey, we're kind of struggling as a team. I like to, if you would be willing to speak to the team. And I remember kind of thinking to myself, so he's off tickets now, he wants me to speak. And so I had never spoken outside of Army formations or anything, but I said yes, of course. He's my teammate. I love him. And so he had actually asked me before he actually presented the idea to Coach Coughlin. And so he presented the idea to Coach Coughlin, and he agreed. And Coach Coughlin called me on a Friday and formally invited me to speak to the team. Now, realize that what was really interesting, and I didn't realize this at this point, but this is the first time in Coach Coughlin's X number of years that he's invited someone outside to speak to his team the night before the game. But so I was the first, and so the night before they played the Redskins, I spoke to him, and I shared a lot of what I spoke to you about tonight, and I remember. So they made some adjustments. They actually, and so I don't really have an appreciation at all on if I got through to anybody or whatever, but they invited me to stay on the sidelines for the game. And so my son is there with me.
I would take that as a resounding yes.
So, but it was just totally over my head. So they were like, so I'm on the sideline, and I remember going into the locker room at halftime. The score was Redskins 14, Giants 3. I'm like, well, you're not a very good motivational speaker. So, but the Giants rallied, ended up winning the game, I believe, 24-17. And so that was the first of 11 consecutive road victories that would culminate in Super Bowl 42, where I got a chance to address the team for a second time that season, the night before they played the undefeated Patriots, the 18-0 Patriots in Super Bowl 42. And what I shared differently that night, or what was different about my speech that night, was I said, when I first spoke to you how many weeks ago, I was a complete stranger, and tonight I'm speaking to you as a teammate. And I said, quite honestly, if I could be anywhere else in the world right now, I would be back with my soldiers in Iraq. But I would take every single one of you with me, because I've seen you all become a team, And I told them that I know that you will defeat the Patriots tomorrow.
And they did. And so they awarded you a ring.
A Super Bowl ring, right? And then we got it, and so we got the encore in Super Bowl 42 against the Super Bowl 46 again against the Patriots, and another W, and they gave me a ring for that too. So,
and I've watched some YouTubes around this preparing for today, and I said it earlier, and you've said it several times, the power of belief. And there's a piece in there when Michael Strahan comes up to the team on this YouTube I was watching,
right,
and he says something to the effect of, remember the power of belief. And he just got the team going.
Yep.
So not only football, you've been on the big screen. You're an absolute big shot.
Yeah, I don't know about a big shot, but I was fortunate that I guess you could say Peter Berg, who's a New Yorker and a film director, was an avid fan of the New York Giants, and his father was a Marine, and so his respect of his father and military service inspired him to invite, and being a New York Giant inspired me for him to invite me to act in the movie Battleship. And, I've never acted in my life. This man was willing to give me a chance. And before you knew it, I was acting.
So what's next? What's the next big Hollywood?
Well, I do. There's a movie called Journal for Jordan that's due out this December. I believe, I'm pretty sure it's Denzel Washington's directing debut. And I'm in a cameo scene I think at the very end of the movie. I haven't seen it. I've just, I filmed on set all day. A scene that was actually filmed in Arlington Cemetery, which was a first in over 22 years. And the story is about an Army non-commissioned officer who was killed before he was able to marry his fiancée that was carrying his child. And it's unfortunately a sad story, not only because of his death, but sort of in this case, some of the gaps in our federal system, because they weren't legally married. The child would not get benefits immediately. And so it just became, so it's the bureaucracy of that. And then unfortunately, some of the dynamics of two families. This soldier, this Army non-commissioned officer that was killed, had actually kept a journal just in case for his unborn son, and that became a significant struggle for his son to get that. So I don't want to ruin it for the audience, but it will bring some tears.
Journal for Jordan and Battleship from 2012.
Yep. And I did one season. I did 10 episodes of a family television series that came on Saturday morning TV called The Inspectors. So I've got some things there, and if I could recommend something to watch, Tom, it would be a PBS documentary called Debt of Honor, and it talks about our country in the last less than 10 years establishing its first national monument for service members with disabilities, and it profiles four of us. I'm one of the four profiled: Max Clune, Vietnam vet, Senator Tammy Duckworth, and J.R. Martinez, and myself are the interviewees that kind of talk about that. But it takes our disabled service members from the very beginning of our country through today, and and some of the things to me that are kind of eye-opening and sad is that, you know, the conversations that we're having now, we've had before.
Sure.
And that's in some ways that's disheartening, because I mean, when you can go back to the beginning of the 19th century and we're talk the same headlines in the New York Times you could read today.
Sure.
And yeah, and that to me is a little disheartening.
We need to make progress, and we need to stick to it and not backslide from it.
Yep.
The Inspectors PBS documentary called Debt of Honor, Journal for Jordan coming out, and Battleship from 2012.
Yeah.
Boy, your career is going all over the place, because we haven't even gotten into all of your entrepreneurship experience. But before we do get into that, Colonel, for some young folks that are in high school, in college, and they're just not sure what direction to go, what advice could you give them from the standpoint of the military? There's great careers to be had. There's a tremendous amount of honor in a career. What advice can you give to young people?
Sure. So, as someone who served in the military for 26 years, I can tell you that serving in the military, I would do everything all over again, 100%, knowing what exactly happened to me. It is that in my service and the relationships I've built around serving have meant that much to me. You know, what I would tell you is that if I've met 10, I've met 1,000 people that have said, I wish I had served. I wish I had served. And so being young, there's a small window that you have and an opportunity to serve. And almost like your education, your military service is something that you'll have the rest of your life. Not all of us are going to ever have a chance to truly be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. I have done and experienced things that the richest people in the world cannot buy. They cannot purchase. It's just amazing from combat, but not just combat, just helping people, the great will of this nation, the kind of technology, the toys that we get to play with, you don't see in the civilian world. And so I've just done I've got some neat experiences. I mean, literally being on an aircraft carrier, standing between two jet aircrafts and launching off of the Eisenhower CVN 68.
Oh, that's what we don't think about too, is some of those amazing experiences. Obviously, team, and you talk about a football team, but think about the teams you were on every year, every day through your career, that it is truly a team from the word go, and everybody has their own back, where out in society, not everybody has their own back. And those are experiences a lot of us will never get to have or get to see.
Yep.
Let's pivot just a little bit here, because you know what? I heard we're listening to you talk. Obviously, you are an amazing speaker, and you have so much knowledge and history to pull from all of your careers, that you have become an entrepreneur. You have Patriot Strategies, LLC, and Pop Culture. Can you share with us what you're doing now and a little bit about these companies and the force that drove you to begin this as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So Patriot Strategies, I actually created the company on the advice of Army lawyers. So I created this company actually less than a year after I was wounded. I found a voice that became in demand because of my journey with the New York Giants, more people wanted to kind of hear from me. And it didn't start out as I was literally just doing it for nothing. And someone said that, you should be getting compensated for this. And so when the compensation thing came in, my lawyer said, look, you should start an LLC so that you can officially keep your government and your non-government activities separate. So I started Patriot Strategies. Patriot was my call sign. I was Patriot 6 when I was wounded. Strategies was a sufficiently vague word. I didn't want to be pigeonholed into anything, so I chose a word like strategy. So, it doesn't really say what I do because I'm not really sure what I do. So, and for the rest of my Army career, really all of my public speaking and acting and anything I did kind of outside of my official duties and uniform fell under that company. As I started approaching retirement, or leaving the Army, what I sort of came to the conclusion was that I want to be in control of my life. I want to be the person that's deciding what I do and when I do it. And so I needed to work for myself. And so I took on a partner, another West Point grad and former teammate who had significant experience in the private sector and in government contracting. And so we decided to turn Patriot Strategies more into or not more into, but to take on government contracting, service-based government contracting. So the majority of the contracts that I'm working with support our government, or really all of our government, Department of Defense, but agencies outside of the Department of Defense and as well. So I have my company is with my partner, we've grown our company to roughly 75 employees over the past 7 years, and so we're growing there. And then Culture Pop is, I say it's all really neat, but Culture Pop was what is a micro-based a micro learning program I call a mirror for you to reflect upon your views. We were motivated by, ironically, the incidents of what happened in Minnesota with George Floyd in creating a program that could help people kind of take inventory of their own biases and their own, really their own biases in an anonymous way. And so, so Culture Pop is, you can buy it in in an app store for either device, but our real target for this program is the private sector companies, for them to offer it as a software, as a service, to allow to enhance their culture, not change it, but to enhance it. In my lifetime, having parents that, you think about this, I'm 55 years old. My parents were born in this country, were born into a society that did not give them the same rights that I enjoy today. They grew up in the Jim Crow South, and we've made change, but and a lot through laws. But my instincts tell me that there's only so far that laws are going to go. Laws can change behavior, but they don't change hearts. And we've got to figure out how to get into people's hearts so that they're not carrying this. And so this is what inspired um, 10 other of my classmates. We added a Naval Academy grad and a Rhodes Scholar from the class of '87. We developed this program to really get at having an impact. And our private sector's got to be part of it too. It can't be just the government. Our whole society as a whole's got to do that. So that's what this program, Culture Pop.
And people can download that from the App Store on any of their devices.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Awesome. So you are one busy guy. I'll tell you what, and when you speak in front of a group, I mean, we're one-on-one right now, but when you speak in front of a group, you command the group like there's no tomorrow, and we sit on the edge of our chairs because I did it firsthand, folks. You sit on the edge of your chair on every word that Colonel Gadson says because it's right from his heart, and he's telling, frankly, you're telling a whole bunch of us what we need to hear, and we don't hear enough.
Thank you. So
we're going to lighten it up here a little bit. So we have a segment here, Colonel, called the Packed Question segment. Pretty ironic, huh? All this pack, these words with pack on them. So what do you, forget Colonel Greg Gadson, love to do in your free time? Other than go on a 125-mile wheelchair race Saturday.
Yeah. Well, great question. And I got to thank you again for you all don't know what Tom did, but I have a Duluth Pack. I got a Duluth camera bag because my passion is photography. And when I was in Minnesota for the Oath Hunt fundraiser, Tom saw my camera backpack on the back of my chair. And so when I was talking to Tom about ordering the camera backpack that he has, he was intuitive enough, observant enough, and considerate enough to say, he asked me to share the measurements of my wheelchair so that they could put custom hooks on this camera backpack. And so I can't tell you how much that touched me, Tom, because that doesn't happen all the time. And it says a lot about you because you observe that. I mean, your intellectual curiosity. I mean, I know that's one reason why you're a successful businessman, but even a greater person, that you picked up on that. I mean, that is absolutely touched my heart and profound. And so it's going to enable me because my photography, that's my canvas, that's my canvas, that's my journal, that's my it's my way of maintaining my balance in life, is, as I call it, slowing down the moment. When I'm in photography mode, I'm slowing life down. I'm being present. And
you do a lot of travel, so I'm assuming you're capturing a lot of your travel now with your cameras and all your gear and trying to capture all that. That's awesome, and we hope you enjoy the bag. That's enough about me. That's not what this whole thing's about. And everyone, I mean, should just take care of each other. It's just the way things should be. So what?
You're being humble. You're being humble and modest, but thank you.
What is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Best piece of advice. I'll tell you, this is, the one that comes to mind is this. I was a pretty junior major. I just completed the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and I reported to Fort Shafter in Hawaii. And this wise Colonel Dave Shanahan, I think he was class of 72 or 71. I can't remember exact West Point class. But he told me, he says, you're a field grade officer now, not a company grade, lieutenant through captain, you're a field grade officer. And he says, your job is to work your way out of a job. You don't want people dependent on you. And you know, and I just think that's some of the best advice I've ever been given. And what has kind of led me in my leadership style has been to, I say, trust, empower, and hold accountable. I don't ever want to become this focal point of, or the single point of failure. And that means you're pushing the power down. You work your way out of a job by giving them the power and authority, minus a few critical things that you hold near and dear to your heart, so they can function. You know, they don't want to have to raise their hand every time they, make a turn, right? That's not running an organization. So the essence of what he told me was,
lead.
Yeah, lead.
That's what I'm hearing from you. If that's correct, is lead, and people will do great.
Yep.
That is what a great piece of advice. My last, and this is an easy one, but you can't cheat here now on this one. I was going to say, okay, what's your favorite movie? But other than the ones you've been in.
Okay. You may remember this, but it's and he's one of my personal heroes. A guy named Gordon Parks Sr. Was one of 13, the youngest of 13 kids that grew up in Fort Scott, Kansas. He wrote and directed the movie Shaft, 1971. But he was a photographer. He was the first African-American full-time photographer for Life magazine. He was a writer. He wrote and directed the movie, and it's really, I have a movie post. I have that movie poster hanging in my office. One of my favorite movies.
That is awesome. So we normally, Colonel, end the segment with saying, until next time, unplug from the indoors and recharge in the outdoors. But today I'm throwing that out the window because this has been really something special for me. I got to tell you. And just so everyone knows, and I want you to go on the internet and look up Colonel Greg Gadson, U.S. Army, served 26 years for all of us, and read some background about Colonel Gadson and the sacrifices he's given for all of us. But today, I just want to do a small dedication because you and we started this out today, and I know I'm throwing this on you, but we both lost. We both lost the same friend, but you lost another friend all on the same day this week, and both of them are veterans of this country. So I'll go first, and then I want you to. I'm dedicating this episode today to Rob Evans, retired U.S. Army. You and I connected because of Rob Evans, and he got cancer and left us very, very quickly. But I want to dedicate this podcast to Rob Evans.
And thank you for doing that, Tom. And another great American general, retired Ray Odinero. In that class of 1976 at the United States Military Academy, retired as the Chief of Staff of the United States Army, was a member of the Chairman and Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he also passed away this Saturday from cancer at 67 years old, too young.
Much too young.
There's just sort of a big hole in the universe with the loss of this great man, and these great men in their own ways, to the very end, touch so many, were given to the very end. And it's, we recognize that this is not a permanent journey, but we know, but it's still painful when we lose some people that give so much.
It certainly is, and that's why I wanted to have a chance to dedicate today, because it's important to both of us. And if we learned anything today, folks, is all of this great words of wisdom from Colonel Gadson is the power of belief. I saw that when he was with the New York Giants. I heard him say it this summer. I heard him say it again today, and that's something I'm going to absolutely leave with, as well as I got a lot of research to do looking all this Hollywood stuff you're doing, Colonel. So, folks, again, Colonel Greg Gadson, U.S. Army, retired 26 years, served us honorably. God bless, Colonel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Tom. God bless.
Thank you much.